Greetings, my name is Dr. Brianne Painia, and I am currently a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Religious Studies at Yale. Before I begin my talk, I wanted to thank Dr. Streets for the invitation to speak as part of Dixwell's Holy Week lecture series. I would also like to thank you, the viewer, for taking the time to listen to my lecture. I promise to do my best to honor the time that you have granted me. So, just want to go ahead and let's get started. Many Black women have been shaped by the practices and beliefs of the African American religious tradition, myself included. Born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, I spent the better portion of my childhood in church, when I was not in school, of course. For me, the church was a place to explore my gifts and talents, receive support from community members, and to tap into a social network that I can still draw from to this day. At church, I was able to practice my public speaking, learn social etiquette, and probably most importantly, engage in the collective spiritual African American tradition that has transcended multiple denominations, physical locations, and social classes, also known as the Black Church. The Black Church, of course, is not just a network of buildings or a group of people, but a cultural experience. And it's in that experience that I got my first understandings of gender, more specifically, womanhood. As much as I loved my time in my spiritual community, there was always the lingering message that as a woman, I can be anything I want in the secular world, but within the church, my possibilities may be limited. I could lead a ministry, but not lead the church. I could give a lecture, but not a sermon like a minister would. And I could devote my all to my household, but I could never be called the leader of it, for I'm to be a helpmate and support my husband as the Bible and the Lord intended. Yet, these same women who were fulfilling these roles were taking charge of their jobs, providing unparalleled leadership and standards of excellence in their respective ministries, and they knew what they wanted and they had no qualms about asking for it. So it's at this tension between my gender and my religious practice that my interest in Black women's attitudes about race, religion, and feminism developed. Through my research agenda, centers on Black women in the Southern Baptist tradition, I ultimately am interested in the how of religious identity and how gender shapes the secular daily life of African American women, a group with a long-standing relationship and connection to the spiritual and religious practices of American Christianity. It is well known that the Black Church is a political, cultural, and racial institution in the African American community, so much so that even when we aren't in church, the influences and traditions fostered in church makes its way into our social spaces. For example, if I were to say, God is good, I'd expect to hear the response all the time immediately. Just as I see the church as a space to empower people to lead where they are called and find meaning where they were unenlightened, I also believe that the Black religious church and the religious body that resides therein could be a launching space for radical gender equality. As the Black religious body has been credited as the centerpiece of larger social justice movements such as the fight against racism, wage discrimination, and the disproportionate treatment of Black persons in the criminal justice system, it can also situate itself as a beacon against gender inequality, the glass ceiling, and the very racist sexism that Black women experience in their everyday lives, professionally, socially, and even in the home. How powerful could it be for Black kids to see equitable gender representation in their church and know that no matter their gender, they can be whoever or whatever they want to be with no caveats, no limits, and no exceptions based off of their sex. Black women make up the majority of most Black religious spaces. They give their time, their labor, their volunteerism, and their passion to these places, and so it's imperative that we also reciprocate that time, effort, and passion into them, not only by making our churches and church communities sites of gender equality, but also by creating appropriate representation of what an anti-sexist community can be. There's no better site for such a stance, as it has the potential to uplift and empower millions of Black girls and boys to know they are truly equal in the eyes of God. As Holy Week represents Jesus' preparation to go to the cross and fulfill his destiny, it is fitting that we mirror his commitment to being no respecter of persons and making space for both men and women to share in the good news of his resurrection through their service, their ministerial work, and just their overall presence in the church. In line with Dixwell's commitment to speak truth to power and to liberate the oppressed, I believe we are in an apt socio-political climate to start a conversation in our religious communities, networks, and social circles about what a gender egalitarian religious body looks like. We need to ask ourselves, how can we make our religious spaces and communities more equitable for the women who have been called the backbone of the church? We as a nation are continuously asking ourselves, how do we truly embrace and realize the statement that we ensure liberty and justice for all? Well, I think one way would be by creating a world where our churches reflect the true makeup of our nation and the possibilities within it for men and women alike. Thank you for your time and attention, and be blessed.
Hello, my name is Martine Gloria Bruno, aka Pastor Gloria, right? I am a student attending Andover Newton at Yale, and I am also an MSW student at UConn School of Social Work. Today, I'll be offering a sermonette along with a challenge, right? So prepare your heart for that. That I'd like us to take after this Lenten season. We're still in the Lenten season, even though it's Holy Week, right? And so let's go out with a bang. So let's get into the word. I want to read John 12, 1-11. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. Y'all remember Lazarus, right? There, they gave a dinner for him. Martha served. Martha was doing the right thing, right? Serving, huh? All right, let me keep on going. And Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, the one who was to betray him. Oh, John is shady. John wanted to tell you that. Anyway, we'll leave that. That's another subject. Okay. But the one who was about to betray him said, "Why was the perfume not sold for 300 denarii, and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. That he kept the common purse and used to steal what was in it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." When the great crowd of the Jews learned that he was there, they came out only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priest planned to put Lazarus to death as well, since it was on account of him that many of the Jews were deserting and believing in Jesus. So, like we said, we are going to go out in the Lenten season with a bang, okay? I want to extend a challenge that the great poet Mina Brown extended to a group of us, to give up the thoughts that do not serve us any longer. Give up the thoughts that do not serve us any longer. And I'd like to also establish that, yes, we are experiencing the Lenten perspective through the eyes of women. And let's just say that that women, we all, they talk about the minority group. Let's give up this idea of the male perspective being the normative, right? Okay, we all can learn something from each other, right? So what I'm saying can be translated to those who identify as male or non-binary. To be honest, this is a reflection not of me as a preacher, but one who wants to share her own thoughts and journey. So we're on this together, okay? So in this passage, we first learn of Martha's service during the Passover. Then we read of Mary's sacrifice. So it's service, and then there's the sacrifice of Mary, the service of Martha and the sacrifice of Mary. And I'm not pitting them together because that tends to happen too with women, like pitting each other against each other, right? That's not what's happening here. What I'm trying to say is that Mary's sacrifice took a lot out of her, just as well as Martha's service. But Mary took a pound of costly perfume and poured of pure nard and anointed Jesus' feet and then wiped it with her hair. The house was filled with this perfume. Mary, I don't know if y'all catch this, but they talk about Mary and Martha living in Lazarus' house. So Lazarus is the one who owns the house. Mary and Martha, they don't talk about Mary and Martha owning much. So I am under this assumption that Mary doesn't have all that much money. So from then we hear that this is expensive, right? So Judas lets us know that this is expensive. So it's like, Mary, you don't even have money. How dare, like, instead of using all that money to just, put it on Jesus, that's just such a waste of money. You could have helped the poor. Now we know that really Judas has ulterior motives, right? But Mary does something really interesting. I don't know if anybody else does this, but I think the Syrophoenician woman kind of does this in a way where it's internally. But Mary's the only person I can remember, and besides Mary, of the mother of Christ, right, who gives birth to Christ on earth, right? Mary's the only person who actually gives Jesus something. Jesus is always going around, doing miracles, blessing people, condemning people. Mary is the first person I can remember that actually does something for Jesus. And it's interesting because, when I say for Jesus in a positive and a beautiful way, because later on we're going to hear about Jesus being given gall, Jesus getting lashes, the humiliation, and the eventual death. But here, Mary is doing something from her heart, who probably doesn't really have the money and probably has been saving this all her life, and she does this for Jesus. And so in Judas's attempt to mansplain and publicly shame Mary due to his own motives, Mary is looked and is humiliated publicly. Brene Brown defines shame as the intensely painful feeling of experience, believing we are flawed, that I am flawed, therefore unworthy of love and unworthy of belonging. Something I've experienced or something that I am or I failed to do makes me unworthy of connection. So we don't know if Mary was shamed by this, but I could imagine something happened so publicly and the internalization of someone who is not even considered worthy of owning property, probably poor. Oftentimes, we as women internalize shame based on someone else's idea of how we should live or who we should be based on their needs. We need to give that up. We need to give that up. And like I said, those who don't identify as woman, you can translate that in your own life. Come on, it's between you and me. Think about it. Commercials, selling products is based on the insecurity of, oh, you need to lose weight. Oh, you need this makeup. Oh, you need age-defying, so on and so on and so on. I'll be honest with you. I have this unhealthy relationship that I'm thinking of giving up with food. Even eating a salad, I feel guilty that I'm going to gain a pound. I enjoyed my salad today and I was like, oh my God, should I do that? It is insane. Well, yeah, in the man brain. I've been heavier and I've been lighter. And in both instances, I am never comfortable. I have never been uncomfortable in my skin. I've never been satisfied with my body because I don't fit the status quo. And then I make myself wrong constantly in my brain. And again, I'm using my experience and being a little bit vulnerable, a little Brene Brown there, right? But think about you. What do you make yourself wrong about? And the constant thinking of, oh, I'm just this bad. I'm this, I'm that. I'm horrible. I'm too fat. I'm too old. I don't walk the right way. I wasn't assigned the right gender at birth. So on and so on and so on. But this Lenten season, I'm committing to creating new neural pathways towards ideas that serve me, that affirms the sanctity of my body, affirms my locks, affirms my skin, affirms my full hips. Oh yeah, Pastor's talking about her hips now. It's time to give up forever the thoughts that doesn't serve us. And I invite you for a minute to give a thought about a thought that doesn't serve you, or at least plant the seeds that it may come out. Maybe write about it later on. And this is only on the micro level. On the macro level, poverty compiled at the intersection of race, gender, and sexual orientation has created the demonization of poor women. Permissive allowance for exploitation of women who are caught in the garret. That was what Judas was trying to do. She ain't nothing. Who does she think she is? She's poor. How dare you just use your little money to do this for Christ? Can we talk about the old stinking thinking based on patriarchal interpretations of the Christian scriptures that lifts up respectability of women, of certain women, based on how much they have, who they're connected to, who and label them as virtuous, or how fair they are, or how, and then tend to demonize the women who are poor, or who are supposed to be the slave bondwoman. Therefore, allowing for the subjugation of those who don't fit into the ideal. Not only does it lead to exploitation, but it has led to death. We've seen it these past couple of weeks. 6 Asian women were murdered, killed. And 68% of the attacks of hate crimes, which has risen of our kindred of Asian descent, 68% is women. My mentor, Lillian Warman, has taught me about how racism looks for Asian women. Often it is undergirded by sexual innuendos and microaggressions. Microaggressions are not so micro. When it leads to the attack of a woman's body. Look, I can't speak for the Asian experience. I can only, as a Black woman, understand that I have to be diligent not to internalize the shame projected on me. And that shame often comes in various levels. We see the assault now of our Asian kindred. But the microaggressions throughout history has been there. It's important for us not to internalize shame projected on us and to be vigilant, because it can be through media, stinking thinking of tradition, etc. Just because someone throws something at us doesn't mean we have to catch it. We can choose what we want to catch. Let's not catch and internalize shame. So, to the next point, Jesus then checks Judas and says, Jesus said, leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor with you, but you don't always have me. Can I get a whoop whoop for Jesus? Jesus is the ultimate ally, honey. Jesus is the ultimate ally. Yes. I love me some Jesus. Yes. Even though Jesus is the Messiah, being an ally does not make us a Messiah. Rather, it wakes up the Messiah within us. As we walk the way of Christ, we must continually remember that it is a daily moment by moment commitment to be like Christ, to awaken the Christ within, the Messiah within. Herein lies our mindful Christian practice. Brene Brown calls us to be shame resilient. And I believe continually thinking about awakening the Messiah within us, which liberates, is a pathway and one of the tools towards shame resilience. Let's not catch everything that comes our way and internalize it. Let's give up the thoughts that does not serve us anymore, that do not serve us anymore. Based on shame, other people try to put on us based on their own motives. Not only are we talking about on an individual level, we're talking on a societal level. When one person experiences injustice, we all experience injustice, and we have to be the ultimate ally, not because we're God, not because we're so great, but when it happens to one, it happens to us all. Let's continually awaken the Christ that liberates our mind, frees our soul. Let's continually activate the Christ by being an ally. My challenge to you is to write down the thoughts that you're giving up. And you're going to need maybe a couple of days past the Lenten season, right? But think about the thought. Let's try one thought. Piano, piano, vai lontano. Think of a thought that doesn't serve you, you're torturing yourself with. And let's create a new neural pathway towards something that strengthens and serves you and serves the purpose that God has called you for in this world. Amen.